Hello, I am Ben Parker. That's Simon Short, and we are Pro Football Enterprises, connected strongly to the Box Score Network. There's a lot of tie-ins there, so presented by both, but most of you will see this on Pro Football Enterprises. We are covering the last episode now of the coaching carousel. We have done extensive work on this. This is probably the second or third year now that we've done extensive work on this, and a lot of people are starting to follow our lead on this. I'm seeing more and more of people wanting to do deeper dives on some of this stuff, and we've been the leaders at it. I think we're some of the best at it, and no one on this network has done more work on it than Simon Short. So, Simon, welcome into the building, man, and we appreciate the work. And how you feeling tonight?
Hey Ben, thanks for having me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yes, as much of a control freak as I am, I love any exercise where I can pretend to put people in places against their will. Um, but I don't actually have to be a GM and reap any of the ramifications for when it goes badly. So I do love doing this. It's a ton of fun. But I do feel horrible because my team made the worst hire. So this is bittersweet for me. I have fun doing it, but also this could not have gone worse for the Steelers. But yeah,
And
I'm
we
great. Thanks,
will,
man.
yeah, you're welcome. We will get to your team about midway through this episode. And talk about that tire as well. I'm not sure it was the worst tire, but we'll get to that too, because me and Simon have at least one, maybe more, but at least one coaching hire where we're pretty strongly far apart. So we'll get into that later on tonight as well. Got some hires that we definitely agree on. The board that you're looking at is Simon's board, okay? Simon has done so much work for this coaching carousel and done deeper dives than I have been able to do. So the board you're looking at here, for instance, the Ravens that we'll get to here in just a second, you'll see head coach, you'll see the new offensive coordinator, the new defensive coordinator. I say new. You'll also see, separate from that, the grades. So you have a vibes grade, a process grade, and a result grade. So Simon, I'll let you real quick tee off on anything you want to there before we actually get into the teams.
Yeah, vibes and process are kind of the two things that make up that result grade for me. Process is important, and it's important to me, and it's important that we don't kind of forget how teams got to where they have gotten to because it's something where we can maybe just say we like a name or we don't like a name. But if we forget the process, I won't say ignore, but if we forget the process and then it gets kind of repeated the next time they have to make a hire, say that's 2 years later, and we're wondering why they had to do this all over again so quickly, then process is something we'll get into. I think back to the Titans 2 years ago when they hire Callahan. And I just remember saying to you on maybe it was this channel, I forget where I think we probably put it on this channel. It feels like the Titans are destined to just have the most bland hire. Like they just get the leftover based on how their interview process was going. And that's what happened. And he got fired in a year and 5 games, right? And so now we're here. So process is important to me. And then vibes, are just like looking ahead. How like now that we're here, how do we feel about it? Um, and you'll see that some teams like maybe they have fallen bass backwards into a good hire, even if their process was bad. So that's where those two different grades can kind of come from. And we'll get more into that as we get into each individual team. But yeah, vibes and process are kind of the things that we can grade on when it comes to picking coaches, because unless they're a retread, and we have several of those in this cycle, we don't have tangible things that we can really grade on how we think these coaches will do because we don't know everything that goes into being a head coach. We don't get to see everything that goes into it. So it's kind of just it's feel. It's what are we thinking right now? It's how do fans feel right now? That's kind of the vibes, and then just the process of how their interviews went, who they were looking to interview, when they made the hire, those sorts of things.
It's a great point about in some cases we really can't tell more than how it feels or vibes because even if you and I did know every single step of what a head coach goes through every day, and we've studied that a lot, it's not as if we know nothing, but we're not there every day to truly get the feel for it. But even if we did, man, It's so difficult to take a guy who's been a part of a staff as quarterbacks coach or quality control coach or whatever and project him truly to a coordinator spot and really know what he's going to do. It's almost as hard, not quite, but almost as hard to take a coordinator who we love, who's never head coached before, and try to say for sure that he's going to be a great head coach. We see so many who don't. And we see every once in a while the McDonald guy who shows up and hits it out of the park right away. So, but it's hard to tell. And it's even more difficult. I'll touch on general managers for a second. It's even more difficult to take some guy who's been in the back
Hmm.
office for years and has a resume and try to say, well, this guy does or does not have the goods to make roster calls for the next 10 to 20 years. It's so hard even for the people in the industry who are getting paid to do this. It's very difficult. We're not making light of that. And I will add this too. Our focus tonight is on the head coaches. We will mention coordinators as we have a good feel for it. We'll mention general managers perhaps as we feel like it really matters, but the focus will be on the head coaches. So if you're like, hey, you didn't mention this coordinator, or hey, you didn't mention this general manager, we do want the focus tonight to be on the head coaches by and large, and we'll work off of that. And listen, I say this so often on this network. We are not trying to be first take or last take or hot take or the most takes. We are trying to bring some adult, well-studied perspective to these conversations, and that's what we do very successfully on this network. It's what you'll get consistently across the show with across the board with every show we put out. We are not always right, but we have always studied, and so you won't find a whole lot of cliches on here or a whole lot of knee-jerk hot takes either. Simon, final thought before we start diving into these teams.
I have one qualm, and that's that we're not always right. Speak for yourself, Ben. I'm always right. I don't never wrong, just early. So I stand by that.
Simon is always right. I am not. And if I ever doubt it, my beautiful wife will remind me that I am not always right.
Uh, I, I plead the fifth.
Yes, yes, that's what you should. Any wise man would. Here we go. Let's get into it. Thank y'all for putting up with a little bit of buffoonery at the start. New York Giants, John Harbaugh, not a surprise. I approve of the hire. I am not going to reference your grades, but you're welcome to trot them out here. Where are you at on Harbaugh to the Giants?
Yeah, this is still a home run hire. I did give this a B plus on vibes because the last couple weeks I think people are starting to feel a little bit itchy. Just from a like the personality. I think people are seeing him out of Baltimore for the first time in all this time. To have a job like NFL head coach for as long as someone does, and as long as Harbaugh did, you kind of lose sense of how much of a control freak that person probably is. Um, and I think now people seeing it kind of like he's not coming into this new job like warm and cuddly, right? He's coming in, he's like taking complete ownership of everything, and it's what the New York Giants need. But I do think it's rubbing some people, not even the wrong way. I think they're excited, but I still think some people are like, "Oh man, this guy is kind of a Jack, you know what, right? Like he's kind of like he just kind of does his own thing. He says whatever he wants, does whatever he wants. He's very blunt, very to the point, and I think we forgot that because we're so used to him in Baltimore and he just runs it the way he runs it and it doesn't stand out. And maybe because Jim comes back into the NFL and is so weird and out there, John seems like the normal one. So I think some people are a little bit surprised by the personality, but also everything that happened with offensive coordinator, right? Like we just assumed he was getting Todd Monken and then everything happens with Cleveland that happens. And Harbaugh just kind of ends up with Matt Nagy, which intellectually I'm very intrigued by. Like I want to see Matt Nagy not with Andy Reid, but not be a head coach and just see him be an offensive coordinator and calling plays. Like I'm very interested in that. If I was a Giants fan, would I be excited about that prospect? Not necessarily, but I'm interested for me to sit here and see, okay, let's see what this looks like. Um, it's also really funny that I can already see what plays out, and if it goes poorly with Nagy, I called Greg Roman would be getting a job on this staff. And so all Giants fans will have to look forward to because everybody wants to fire the offensive coordinator, right? So all Giants fans are going to be able to look forward to is when Nagy goes, Greg Roman just steps in as OC, and we know what that's going to look like. Um, which again, Roman, I've said a million times, ultimate floor raiser. Like it's not going to be bad, but there's a reason playoff teams keep moving on from Greg Roman. Um, but I still gave the vibes a B plus, and I gave the process an A. Like the Giants, just like the Titans, being the teams that fired their head coach midway through the season, they got to cast the widest net when it came to interviews, and they interviewed everybody under the sun. And Harbaugh, once he became available, taking Mike Tomlin out of it because Tomlin was not interested in coaching this year. Um, Harbaugh was the number one candidate, right? And they got him. So like there's not a whole lot you can say against this hire other than, ooh, okay, it's maybe a little bit itchier at the beginning than we kind of thought from a vibes perspective. But I think New York needs it. I think they needed a shakeup. So they're going to get stability. They're going to get someone that's had success for a long time. Um, Maybe someone could argue that they wanted someone more like young and up and coming for their young quarterback, right? That kind of vibe. But even if let's say Dart doesn't get to like the 100th percentile outcome of what he could be because they don't have this hotshot offensive mind taking over, the situation around Dart is going to be so good. It's going to insulate him, I think, from such a good developmental standpoint this early in his career that might still increase his chances of becoming the best quarterback he can be because he's not falling into all the bad habits, having, a terrible team around him, all those sorts of things. So this is a great hire for the Giants to get Harbaugh.
I will respectfully say the Harbaugh, it wouldn't be the Harbaugh family, the Harbaugh sons, the Harbaugh brothers, if there was a little bit of jerkiness and control freak involved.
Yeah.
I personally don't enjoy being around people like that. It doesn't, it doesn't go well typically, but I don't mind them being outspoken, especially if they know what they're talking about. If they know what they're talking about, I can put up with it because
Hmm.
I can trust that this person, even though they got that rough bedside manner, can get me where I want to go. Now, if I start to pick up on the fact that they're just a donkey and they don't really know what they're talking about, then get that person out. I have no use for them at all. Just get them out. But Harbaugh is a winner. I love this hire for the Giants. It says a lot for the Giants organization that they were able to grab him fairly quickly. I mean,
Hmm.
really, we know of franchises where some of the leading candidates didn't want to go. They canceled interviews. They were even willing, in some cases, to go be a coordinator somewhere else rather than head coach. That's not the
Hmm.
case here for the Giants. So it speaks well that they're able to grab the best candidate, to me, the best candidate out there so quickly. I like you. I'm not thrilled with the Nagy hire at all as offensive coordinator. I honestly felt like Harbaugh probably has a big enough Rolodex where he could have, in theory, gotten somebody better. But I'll bet you that there are offensive coordinators, bright minds out there who don't really want to work under the Harbaugh infrastructure, if you will. So that probably limited some of the names that were really interested in coming. The Denard Wilson hire as defensive coordinator, I love. I will ask you here. Harbaugh was in Baltimore for so long. And he comes in with the general manager in Joe Shane, who's been there for a few years now. Do you see at any point any kind of a power struggle here between a Harbaugh who's well established and a Joe Shane who, while I never viewed him as being on the hot seat, there have been questions over the past 2 or 3 years as to just how good he is, being that he's still breaking in here to some degree. Any feeling about that at all?
Um, I think the power struggle already happened. I think that's what the whole interview process in those last 2 days before Harbaugh inked the deal was. I think that was the power struggle. I saw something today that said that Shane at this point is just in charge of like managing the scouting department. Like that's pretty much his whole thing. Like I think he's gonna be the one like assigning, okay, pro scouts and college scouts and get the draft board ready and collect all the scouting reports and then he brings them all to Harbaugh and he gives his 2 cents and maybe he's the one like working the phones at the draft and stuff like that. But I think Shane, at least for a little while, is going to be I don't want to say glorified, but he's going to be a senior level scouting director. I think Harbaugh's going to get final say on all this, on the 53, on free agent signings, on draft picks, everything. Um, I liken this a little bit to when Howie Roseman kind of got pushed to the business side of the Eagles for a few years there when Chip Kelly came in. Because remember, Roseman was the GM with Andy Reid, and he was the person doing the all the roster stuff with Reid, and then when Kelly comes in, Roseman essentially got fired from being GM. He's over on the business side doing stuff for a few years, and then I think it wasn't until Peterson came in that Roseman was kind of welcomed back in as GM, and that's what I think this is going to be for Shane. I think Shane is sort of in a figurehead position now for a little bit, and maybe he outlasts Harbaugh, or maybe he just sticks around and to the point that he collects some power back, whatever. But I think that power struggle already happened. Sure, if things go poorly for another 2 years and Harbaugh says, I want the assistant GM from the Ravens to come in now, then I think that could happen. But I think in all the important ways that power struggle already happened, and Shane lost.
That's really good insight there. So and again, I think that makes a lot of sense here. So we'll see. For now though, everybody's got what they want, and hopefully, if there's winning involved, then everybody keeps their jobs. Everybody's
Yep.
happy. You know,
Hmm.
that's the main thing. Let's move on to the next team here. Baltimore Ravens. Jesse Minter hired as the head coach. Simon, go ahead and give us your first feel on it.
I'm extremely upset because this was a fantastic job by the Baltimore Ravens. I wasn't sure if they would want some piece of that Harbaugh DNA since they just fired Harbaugh, but they clearly did. Not only hiring Jesse Minter, who worked under Harbaugh for years, then worked under the other Harbaugh for years, but also Anthony Weaver. Returning to Baltimore, was a position coach for a good while with the Ravens, is now their defensive coordinator. But I have no qualms with it. I'm not deterred by the fact that, oh, okay, they fired Harbaugh, but then they just hired guys that worked for Harbaugh. Is that weird? No, because Harbaugh and the Ravens were very successful in that time. And they just wanted to go in a new direction. They wanted a new voice, and maybe a little bit make up for letting Mike McDonald go. But what better way to kind of continue a lot of the culture and success that you've had for all these years? You don't want to take a step back. You don't want to completely change things, but you need to liven things up. You get a coach that was in the building for a long time, has worked with guys similar to Harbaugh for a long time, and is 20 years younger. And you know what? He's also more of an X's and O's guy on one side of the ball, and he's going to add something there that you really haven't had in Baltimore in a while, as in terms of a head coach being someone who, hey, I really understand what's happening in the league right now on this side of the ball, and I'm the one executing it. Um, Jesse Minter is young and forward thinking, and that shows in his hire of Declan Doyle as offensive coordinator as well, a guy that is very young, hasn't been an OC, hasn't been a play calling offensive coordinator before, only 1 year as a true offensive coordinator under Ben Johnson. But Doyle was a guy that I pegged very early in this process. He was the first head coach candidate that I mentioned when we did a first show a couple months ago, and those two like young guys just getting together and helping this Ravens team kind of with all the talent they have just kind of propel into next season is really fantastic. So I really like what they're doing here, and bringing Anthony Weaver back also just fits because they're going to be able to keep that defensive mold that they've basically had when Weaver was still there as a position coach. So I think this is a home run. This is I think the best hire, the best staff top to bottom. They also brought in the offensive line coach from the Falcons, who has done a lot of great stuff in Atlanta with their run game and pass protection. So A pluses all across the board for the Ravens.
I am cautiously very excited about this staff coming in. Is a great way to put it. Part of that is because I'm an old duck, okay? I have been around so long. I've been watching this since the late 80s, and I have heard so many people introduce so many great minds who were the next great thing, and it just usually isn't the case. They're usually somewhere between decent to bad. And every once in a while, you get McDonald out there in Seattle. You know, that happens, you know. But having said that, beyond the fact that we just don't know what this guy can do as a head coach, Minter's a name that has been shooting up the ranks for the past couple of years. He's been highly coveted as far as people being very interested in having him come in. And we just haven't heard anything negative about his capabilities, his mindset, all of that. So, as much as you can be about a truly unknown commodity from a head coaching standpoint, Jesse Minter gives you that hope. I agree with you about keeping the culture a lot the same. I didn't see any need really to be changing culture here other than getting younger, and that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. And Declan Doyle, I love that from a potential standpoint because again, we've been hearing the same things. And listen, I'm not going to get on here tonight and talk about every bright mind that's come in here, okay? Because we've got what, 15 of them between the coordinators and the head coaches. They can't all be good. All right, half of them are going to be gone in 2 years. Okay, so they can't all be brilliant in spite of the fact that they're smart, right? But you have this Ravens team here. The roster's in good shape. You bring in Mentor, you bring in Doyle. I love the young potential there. And then, yeah, you bring back in Anthony Weaver, who is a proven commodity from a defensive coordinator standpoint. So nothing much to change there. I like this. I don't quite put the stamp of approval on it the way I did with Harbaugh to the Giants, ironically, but I like this. There's a lot of good things set up here, and maybe you just get some not only younger thinking, but more creative thinking and maybe newer, more newly minted thinking. So I'm a fan of this with a little bit of caution. Last word here on the Ravens.
I'm real upset, but good for them.
Moving on, the Buffalo Bills. This one, this one, I'm going to lay a little foundation here before I get into your grades. You and I have talked about, and other people have talked about Joe Brady being a potential head coaching candidate for 2 or 3 years now, maybe even a little bit longer than that, really. And he has been well respected, and he has not only moved up the ranks, he has stayed up there, which is not easy to do. A lot of times, your name gets hot, and then if you don't get a head coaching job after a couple of cycles, you cool off. He stayed. So I was not surprised he got this job. You and I even mentioned it that it might happen weeks and weeks ago before it actually did happen. As far as potential candidates, if McDermott were to be let go, we talked about that. But it did seem to surprise, anger, and even shock quite a few people. So, having laid all that little bit of foundation there, give us your outlook on Joe Brady now for the Buffalo Bills.
So Brady and the Bills, I'm mixed on because like you said, I've been waiting for Joe Brady to get his shot for a long time. And in a vacuum, the best way for Brady to continue having success is to stay with Josh Allen, right? He's staying with a unicorn quarterback, one that he's worked with for years, one that when Brady became the OC and took over the play con, the Bills offense really not only stabilized but also just got better. And Josh Allen has played better. So like all these things should be very, very good, right? And if I look at my grades and I even say, well, look at their process, I wouldn't have fired McDermott after the season, but it's defensible. I can see it, right? It's been a long time. Haven't gotten over the hump with Josh Allen. Um, the way things kind of exploded at the end of the playoff run. I mean, we were slacking back and forth on this when it happened. Like it came down to turnovers and like just mistakes and then the defense. And like as the head coach and a defensive minded head coach, those are the things McDermott was directly responsible for. So I could see all that. So I think and then the interviews. They were interviewing some really good names, which was surprising based on how quick the turnaround was, right? To fire McDermott after the divisional round and then turn around when all these other candidates have already started interviews and some had already been hired. Like they still put together a really good pool of candidates that they were interviewing. Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll, Grant Udinski, all these guys. And it was like, okay, these are there's a lot of candidates and there's good candidates in here, right? It's not just names that they're checking off. And they end up coming out with Joe Brady, their guy. And so all of that is good. But man, the vibes are horrible. Everything from that post firing press conference with ownership and Brandon Beane is not encouraging. And it just makes you really think that McDermott was holding things together because you think about all the turmoil for the Bills before McDermott was there, right? And it's just like and Bean was one of these GMs in this cycle that should have been gone if the head coach was going to be gone. But not only that, he gets a promotion, he gets a bump in title, he's getting a bump in responsibilities. I remember from Brady's press conference, a tweet, a media person tweet that came out of it with a quote was essentially that like Brady will be reporting to Brandon Beane. Like Beane is going to be responsible for like essentially putting the roster together, and he's going to be managing the draft. He's going to be managing all of free agency, which makes sense. Like Brady's the first time head coach. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you give him all the keys, but this and it was something about like and Joe Brady's going to be in line with what I decide, basically. And it's like this doesn't feel like a good situation for Brady being a young first time head coach with an owner that seems out of touch and a GM who is off the rails but collecting more power. Um, I don't think this is going to be a great setup for him. But like you said before, winning cures all. So if they just continue to have a top five offense, um, I like the coordinator hires that he's made. It's nothing super exciting from a like, okay, we know what these guys are going to do from an XO standpoint. But Pete Carmichael, longtime Saints coach, was Sean Payton's OC forever. Continued to work with Sean Payton in Denver. And then Jim Leonard is a defensive coordinator name that we were very excited about. He's coming from Denver as well. So if I kind of just put that together, that both are coming from Denver right now. So if Brady's stealing a little bit of that, bringing in a little bit of that magic, and Carmichael is someone he's familiar with. Brady worked under Carmichael for a couple of years with the Saints, but he's got a veteran guy with him that's been there, done that. He can Brady can still call the plays, but Carmichael has been an offensive coordinator for play calling head coach for a long time, so he's going to be very familiar with that role and comfortable with that role. Um, just in the vacuum of Joe Brady being the coach of the Bills and Josh Allen, I feel good about. But man, the stuff that's surrounding it, that the vibes are way down. So my overall grade was pretty poor on this one. Um, I say pretty poor. I think I gave it a C, so it's fine. But vibes, I gave like a D, process a B. Like I'm excited for Joe Brady to see what he's finally going to be able to do with the opportunity.
I like the Joe Brady hire as good as I like the Jesse Minter hire and a couple of the others. Again, we've been hearing about these names. We've seen their work. We don't know what they'll be as HC. So I totally am in favor of Brady being pulled in. But you're right. The vibes are awful. The owner and the general manager both, goodness gracious, ever since the McDermott firing, it has been awful. I mean, you talk about poster children for how to not handle things. That's exactly what's going on. I don't I don't really like the argument that I've heard from a lot of the talking heads is that, well, if you're going to let McDermott go, why would you hire somebody that had been part of his staff? That happens from time to time, all right? And hey, listen, I've even mentioned a franchise that might potentially happen with earlier a few weeks ago that you may have your head coach in waiting sitting at the offensive and defensive coordinator positions while the head coach gets one more try at it. So, don't be surprised when those kinds of things happen. But you're right, the vibes are awful. They are just absolutely dreadful, and I really didn't expect that. There's even online petitions for McDermott to get his job back, which is very unusual.
Wow.
So yeah, the vibes have been terrible. The McDermott firing itself was debatable. I understand fully why he just hasn't been able to get over the hump, and that's reason enough to let him go. And yet, I really respect McDermott a lot. Most of all because he took a Buffalo Bills franchise that had been dreadful ever since
Hmm.
the 90s and took them back to the playoffs before Josh Allen got there. That alone, I believe Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback for the most of that season. That alone spoke volumes about what McDermott could do. And yet, when you have Josh Allen and when you've had several shots at it, and when Mahomes isn't even in the playoffs this year, and you don't get there, I totally understand why they let him go. I didn't understand the Bean promotion. I understand if you want to keep the GM because the roster has been largely good over the years, and you could argue about how it's constructed right now. But again, they did a little bit of a factory reset on defense when they let go of some of their moneyed guys a year or so ago. So it's in a rotation phase right now. I understand keeping the GM. I didn't understand promoting him. That part just screamed power struggle. So that's what Joe Brady is walking into. You're 100% right. If they win, none of it will matter at all. But, if he's 2 seasons in and the team is struggling a little bit, or they're getting kicked out in the wild card rounds, then he'll be out quick. So, final thought here on the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it feels like Bean is going to be one of those GMs that's going to get another try at another head coach if it goes badly with Brady
Yeah.
quickly. It's going to be, oh, well, we did it for Josh, or we wanted some familiarity with the offense, but we knew we needed to break out, that argument of we knew we needed to break out of that coaching staff or whatever they're gonna make up. Um, and yeah, that does not feel like it's a good place to be.
No, it's not. We saw some of the same thing for years with Chris Greer down in Miami. For whatever
Right.
reason, you
Hmm.
have a guy who has the owner's ear, and it seems to be really difficult to shake that. I think it's more understandable with Bean because they've done more winning, but still, clearly for him to get that promotion, he's got the owner's ear all the way right
Oh
now.
yeah.
Stay tuned in Buffalo. Let's move on. Clint Kubiak to the Raiders. This is one of the more recent hires, of course, because of the Super Bowl. So give us the lowdown on Clint Kubiak here to the Raiders.
Yeah, so I gave them the third highest overall grade. I think vibes I gave a B plus, more just because Clint Kubiak, the person, isn't getting people excited. Like he's a pretty low key guy. He's not a guy that people really knew his first name until this year, I think, because even when he went to New Orleans, it was just like, okay, there's a Kubiak in New Orleans. All right, cool. Um, and it wasn't until this year and all the success that was coming with it that people were like, okay, Clint, it's that one's Clint. Okay, let's keep an eye on Clint. Um, but he is the offensive coordinator that just won the Super Bowl with the top 10 offense in the league, despite not having an elite quarterback. Has to get fans going, man. Like that is and I realized we just did this a year ago with Pete Carroll. Oh, future Hall of Fame coach, you've never had a bad team, has to get people excited, right? Um, but this time it's different because this time there's an actual tangible, like one side of the ball focus. And that's what I really liked about the Raiders and their process this time around. Because with Pete Carroll, it was, yes, we know he has coached good defenses in the past, but we also know the Seahawks defense for several years there at the end for Pete Carroll hadn't even been a top 10 defense. So what you were getting in Carroll was experience and culture, intangible, untangible, not tangible things. Um, but Kubiak, it's okay, well, this guy just was the OC for a top 10 offense that was like explosive. It got better in the run game as the year went along. The when he was the OC for the New Orleans offense, they had a great 3 week stretch in running the ball before their offensive linemen all got hurt. So like there is something tangible from a schematic standpoint that we can point to with this guy. And he has spent time under some great head coaches in his past on his way here. So there's again tangible stuff on the field that we can point at for them. Um, and even though his coordinators are fairly unknown, that's to be expected with a guy who's a bit younger and a bit less known in Kubiak. But he knows those guys because offensive coordinators Andrew, I don't know if it's Yanako or Janako, but he comes with him from Seattle and I believe New Orleans as well. And then Rob Leonard, they're retaining as defensive core. Well, they're retaining from the Raiders coaching staff. Rob Leonard, the defensive coordinator, was the defensive line coach. He had been there for 4 seasons, but he had spent some time, I want to say, with the Miami Dolphins under Flores for a few years. So that's exciting. And then he went to Baltimore and was with Mike McDonald for a year before taking this job with the Raiders. Um, so there's some familiarity there between McDonald and Kubiak and Leonard. So those names are interesting. But it was just what I like best about this is their process because it became very clear very quickly. They were prioritizing the younger coaches um, by Minter and Shula and Shieldhouse and Kubiak and I forget if Udinsky was in here, but Davis Webb became very clear they were looking at okay, we want younger coaches, and then when Minter and Shula also kind of fell off, it was like okay, no, it seems like they're favoring the offensive side of the ball, so they want someone who's going to be young, forward thinking, and can put together a really good offense. They zeroed in on that, and they ended up getting the offensive the version of that just won the Super Bowl. So I think this is a great hire by the Raiders. I get that he's not this huge rah-rah guy, but we saw Mike McDonald's personality after they won the Super Bowl. You can win a Super Bowl without a rah-rah guy being your head coach. And I think getting Kubiak, who just saw an example of that, is a really nice match. So I think it'll be really good for the Raiders.
I love the potential of this hire. I like this hire probably even better than the Jesse Minter hire myself. I'm a huge Clint Kubiak guy. Having said that, I have very mixed feelings about how this situation may turn out. And again, I have to be cautiously optimistic because we haven't seen Clint work as a head coach. I mean, he's had no shot at that. So we haven't seen it. We're gonna have to wait. Now, my hope comes from the fact that I have seen his work as OC, both with the Saints and with the Seahawks, and I love the feel that he has for play calling. He seems able to put players in good positions, which was an earmark of what the Patriots did for years, getting players in a spot where they can get their best, not what's best for, Kubiak's philosophies, but where the players can function best. So I love that. I probably was way too early on Kubiak back when he was with the Saints, but I just really liked immediately what I saw from a play calling standpoint. I think he's got a great feel for that. So I have high hopes for that. I said this a few weeks ago, though. I was hoping Clint would stay on the shelf for a couple more years and get some more gravitas. I hate to see a guy get trotted out there too early and then become a retread, and now you've got more questions than you have answers. So I'm a little nervous about that side of it. I kind of was wanting to pocket him for a little bit longer, a couple more cycles. I thought it would have done him well. I'm more concerned though about Raiders dysfunction. I've been wanting Mike Tomlin to go coach the Raiders for 2 or 3 years now and just come over and kick the crap out of the dysfunction in this freaking organization. The same way I want Brian Flores to go back down to Miami and kick the crap out of the dysfunction there. Okay? Like it's just ridiculous. But they don't have Tomlin. Maybe Tomlin never coaches again. They have Clint Kubiak. What they do have is Tom Brady floating around. And I don't think that's helping the dysfunction that existed in the organization long before Brady got there. And Brady's a very smart guy. He's a hard worker. I have no doubt that he can contribute something somewhere. It just feels like too many cooks in the kitchen here, and that's not going to help anything. I don't think it helps a younger guy like Clint with a largely, somewhat uncoveted staff that he's working with as well. These weren't the top names on everybody's list for coordinators. It's a lot of dysfunction floating around and a lot of young unproven, in spite of the fact that I really do love Clint's mindset, his ability to call plays here. So I love the hire. I'm a little mixed on the situation. Final thoughts on the Raiders?
The one other thing that makes me a little nervous is he's just never had the OC job in one place 2 years in a row. He's been an OC three times. All of them were 1 year stints. Um, Now it wasn't that he specifically got fired like twice. The whole staff change, right? Wait, did he get fired? What was the Minnesota one when he was in Minnesota? Let me look at this. Um, because he was the Minnesota OC in 2021 under Zimmer. And yeah, yeah, 2022 was O'Connell's first season. So it was like staff change. So it wasn't that it's not that he keeps getting fired, but it's just the sense of like, okay, you were the OC for 1 year. Now let's see what you do in year two. Do you mix things up? Do you have a new set of players you have to adjust to? We've just never gotten to see that. So when you're the head coach, hopefully you're the head coach for more than one season. So we don't know what that process looks like for him either. It'll be interesting to see though.
That's the Raiders. I think we both are Kubiak fans, but cautiously optimistic about where this may go ultimately. The Miami Dolphins. I'm going to tell you straight up. I like this hire better and better the more we got deeper into the carousel. Having said that, I wasn't huge on Halfley. I know a ton of people who are. I mean, goodness gracious. Halfley seemed to have as many supporters, honestly, as Mentor, as some of these other unproven head coach guys. He seemed to have just as many supporters, but from a different faction. So, but the deeper we've got into this carousel, the more I've liked the hiring of him. So go ahead and tell us about Jeff Halfley and his staff.
Well, it's ironic, Ben, because as time goes, I like this hire less and less. I was a Hafley supporter as kind of like I thought he was like on that tier two. Like if Harbaugh and Stefanski and I don't even know if I was putting Minter in tier one necessarily, but if Harbaugh and Stefanski and then the potential of Tomlin was like tier one of coaches available this cycle, Hafley to me was tier two because hey, we've seen him be a head coach before, we've seen him in college, the NFL, we've seen him transform defenses. Um, Seems like a really good teacher, really good connector of personalities, but also seems like he's going to be tough and like set a standard, all of that stuff. But now, what I'm not liking is something that is it's a factor that people always say against hiring the defensive-minded head coach, and it's what are they going to do with the offensive side of the ball? The process of getting to Miami and retaining Bobby Slowick, who had been fired from Houston the year before and latched on to Miami as their pass game coordinator, and getting to Miami and finding Slowick and saying, I'm not only going to keep you, but I'm going to promote you to offensive coordinator. And then how about you go back to Houston, where you coordinated one of the worst offensive lines in the league, and hire their assistant offensive line coach to be our offensive line coach? For a team that has had poor offensive line play and up and down offenses over the last 3 seasons, is really troublesome. Not only because I'm worried about what the offense is actually going to look like on the field, but I think it also speaks to a little bit of that. This guy hasn't been an NFL lifer. This guy hasn't been in a lot of different places in the NFL to collect a lot of business cards, let's say, from NFL coaches. And did he just like get in the building and like meet the positional coaches and be like, "Hey, Slowick, I kind of like you. We have both worked in San Francisco at different points, and I want to shake your hand, and now we're here. Um, and let's promote you." It feels a little icky. So that's the part I'm most worried about. Um, we should say while we're here that today the Miami Dolphins released Tyreek Hill, um, the other wide receiver who's Nick Westbrook-Akine and Bradley Chubb. So they're already starting the like cap clearing. So this feels, and I'm sure two is going to be gone soon. Well, I shouldn't say soon. They have to work it out. But this feels like it's going to be a total teardown reset. And when I just think about Halfley and think about, okay, do I think he can do the job as head coach? Do I think he can lead a franchise? And do I think he can put together a good defense? He's bringing over a lot of defensive staff. Yes, yes, and yes. But man, if you're not going to get the offensive side of the ball thing right, then I'm nervous. And for Slowick to be kind of that first crack at it concerns me. Now listen, Slowick, his first year as OC in Houston, we liked and we were interested in. But year two and just what happened after that was really uninspiring. And it just kind of feels like a case of Halfley like didn't really know what to do with that side of the ball. So he just found a guy that had done the job before and was already in the building. So I'm a little nervous from that aspect. But Halfley himself, I was excited about going in, so I still gave this. I think I ended up giving this like a B minus. I gave it a B for vibes, a C plus for process, and again, even the process part was more about what Halfley did, not necessarily what Miami did to get Halfley.
I completely agree with you on 90% of what you just said. Okay. I thought that was beautifully well done with a couple of exceptions that you already know my history here on some of this. So the Halfley hire, the more people I've heard talk about him. And again, I got to watch him at Boston College. Okay. When he was working there, I got familiar with him there. He rolls into Green Bay, and yeah, it upgrades the defense. You also get Micah Parsons along with that, but still, upgraded defense. Excellent work there. I have no problem with him coming in. I do like the tough mindset. You mentioned that. I think that's very important in Miami. I think that's something that they had under Brian Flores, but you go before Flores and after Flores, it's not something they've had, along with what would feel like modern thinking and in high football IQ. They just haven't been able to get that. It feels like Halfley meets all of those. You mentioned all of that. Okay, so I'm on board with all of that completely. When it comes to though this because you mentioned this a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when it comes to this offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick that he's put in, I was maybe I wasn't the first. I had to be one of the first. I didn't like Slowick's work, excuse me, during the first year when he was successful with Stroud. I looked at that offense. I didn't like the way he called plays. I didn't like the way the offense worked. I just thought it was kind of blocky. I thought it was unimaginative. I thought it was kind of clusterish. I felt like it had no smoothness, no efficiency, nothing. And I'm not talking about from a statistical standpoint. I'm talking about when I watched the offense. I hated that offense. And I said at the end of that first year, when everything was good, when they had a good season, Stroud's best year, I was like, I don't like this offense and I don't like the coordinator running it. So I sure as heck don't like it down here in Miami. where they're starting to take things apart. And, after, a second bad season there in Houston for the offensive side of the football when Sloak was there. And then, yeah, you mentioned the offensive line has been rough. I mean, rough down in Houston. The Miami Dolphins offensive line hasn't been great for years. They're working on it. It's gotten better. I would still like to see it improve, but it has improved over what it was before. And yet you're going to bring back in the Texans offensive line coach. I really struggle with that. I said this again a couple of weeks ago, and I don't mean to regurgitate everything. I would love to be the general manager for Jeff Halfley because I think the energy is there. I think the football IQ is there. I think his ability to handle the defense and run the team. He doesn't seem like the kind of a guy who's cheerleaderish, but he's got the energy. And to me, there's a
Hmm.
huge difference, man. I
Hmm.
I I have no time for head coaches that want to be, a little too cute, a little too, a little too sweet.
Hmm.
Halfley seems to bring the energy without being kind of hokey, if you will. I think
Hmm.
that's a really big difference. But I would love to be able to put players together for him. I think me and him would be in sync about the kind of players we would be looking for. And I would have to tell him, man, we're not bringing Slowick in here. Let me call around. Let me find somebody to be your offensive coordinator, and then you guys can put together the rest of the staff below that. But let's bring in one of these younger minds here. Let's bring in a Declan Doyle and hand him the play calling duties, right? Let's do something like that. I would have much preferred that. So I'm very skittish on the Dolphins here for the next year or two on the offensive side of the football. And maybe Slowick will prove me wrong, but so far Bobby ain't done it, so we will find out. But I still like the Jeff Halfley hire, especially as I've seen some of these other teams that we haven't talked about yet. As I've seen them hire coaches, I'm like, yeah, I prefer Halfley a lot to that.
Yeah. And maybe this will be a Mike McDonald going to Seattle situation where he hired Ryan Grubb out of Washington.
Yeah.
That went bad after 1 year. He fired him. He gets Kubiak in. But the difference is Ryan Grubb was coming off of like a really good season in college. So McDonald was like, let's mix things up. Let's do something a little different. Let's get this college guy that I really and Hafley just kind of walked in the building and per NFL.com, their interview tracker, Slowick was the only person they interviewed for the job. So it literally seems like Hafley walked in the first day and shook his hand and was like, "You want to be offensive coordinator? Let's just keep things rolling." And yeah, I don't love that.
Come on, Jeff. You
Come
could
on,
have
Jeff.
done better. Yeah. There's still time. Hey, let's make the change now.
We'll talk about Nate Hackett, but I might have even preferred he just brought Nate Hackett from Green Bay. I might have preferred that.
I don't know. I'll have to chew on that one for a while. Okay. Well, we're getting strikes with everybody here. So that's the Miami Dolphins, Joe. And
Ugh.
now we had to do it at some point, Simon. Maybe you're looking forward to this. Maybe it's your time to shine here and rip the franchise, but we had to do it at some point. Mike McCarthy comes rolling into Pittsburgh.
I can't even describe to the people the amount of messages, the amount of scathing messages I've sent to you, to my Ravens buddy who had a great hiring cycle,
Yeah.
to my own father about how badly I feel about this decision. But I tried to sum it up for you here. Um, the first thing is aside from like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, like coaching one of those guys, this had to have been the most desirable job out there based on the history of longevity for Steelers head coaches, based on the history of the franchise, based on the amount of talent that is still on this roster. You would think this would be the most highly coveted job you could have gotten this offseason. And yet the Steelers hired a candidate that was only interviewed by two other teams, and they were the two teams that fired their coach during the season so they could cast the widest net. None of the teams that ended their season, fired their coach, and turned to a real coaching cycle interviewed Mike McCarthy. And yet the Steelers hired him. And not only did they hire him, they did so in a way that suggested he was kind of their pick from the beginning. Because while during the virtual interview segment of this cycle, They were looking at like the Rams assistants. So they were, oh, Shieldhouse and Shula. Ooh, if they pair those guys together, that was my dream. That was my dream from day one. Like, um, this could be a big deal, right? Two young coaches that they're looking at and going against Minter and a young defensive mind like the Steelers always do, yada yada. But they really only interviewed five guys, I think, for the head coach job overall, and only three guys came in for in-person interviews. And it was McCarthy, it was Brian Flores, and Anthony Weaver. And I'm sorry to say, but it looks like the Steelers satisfied the Rooney Rule with two black head coach candidate interviews, and then hired Mike McCarthy. And that is atrocious, and that is embarrassing. And it really suggests that Art Rooney II, the owner, saw Mike Tomlin leave and said, how do I just keep things rolling status quo? And it's I get another coach who's been coaching a long time, has had success, but also he's not going to have to learn anything because he's from Pittsburgh. And that's so
Yeah.
the whole Pittsburgh tie thing. I mean, if you look, more than half of the guys that McCarthy has hired have ties to being from Pittsburgh or Western PA in some form or fashion. Um, and you know, he gets on the at the press conference and he's tearing up about how special it is, and I get, and that's nice. I'm human. I can enjoy that and be happy for him as a person. But the history for the Steelers of, if you wanted to repeat history, right? Do the easy thing, and you play the long game, and you hire a young defensive minded coach in his 30s. This was the draft cycle to do that, or the coaching cycle to do that. And Rooney was so scared of even repeating that history that he just wanted to repeat the last 5 years, and he got older at head coach and just picked a guy from Pittsburgh. So the guy like knows where he can buy a house, probably has a house in Pittsburgh already, and gets to learn about the whole learn know the culture of the city. I know the culture of the city. I've been there one time. I was there for 2 days. I get it. All right. Everybody knows what Pittsburgh is like. It just bite me. Anyways, um, what else here? So just an incredible blunder to have the most highly coveted job in my opinion and do this. And now Pittsburgh follows suit of Dallas to be the latest team that falls for McCarthy's stories in the interview. Remember in Dallas, he said he watched every single NFL game from the year before to get the job, and in his opening press conference, it's like, yeah, I didn't do that. I lied. That was the first thing he told everybody. And now he comes to Pittsburgh, and his big selling point in the interview was all of the quarterbacks he developed, except all of those quarterbacks were already in their like mid 30s, and half of them were already like Hall of Fame guys. Like, what are we talking about here? Um, and this only gets worse because every day that goes by, it seems increased that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back and be the quarterback. So it's like you got, if you wanted to say he was going to develop a quarterback and you just get a guy that's in his 40s that he already quote unquote developed. Are you kidding me? Get out of here. If we wanted a nice coming home story for a guy that's going to help the Steelers find their next quarterback, hire him as a quarterback's coach, right? Let him develop some young kid in his last 5 years of being a coach and then let him ride off into the sunset. Don't make him the head coach. This is atrocious. So I gave this basically an F for everything. F for vibes, D for process. I gave him a D for process instead of an F just because they technically looked at some young guys, but like that should honestly be an F as well. So just embarrassing all around. It's awful. This sucks. I hate it here.
So I'm going to give McCarthy some respect first, and then I'm totally going to rip this higher. It makes no sense from any angle. Okay. I mean, none, not even a little bit from any angle. So, first of all, I criticized Mike McCarthy a good bit back when he was in Green Bay. I just didn't like the fact that he had Aaron Rodgers for so long and, had so many good regular seasons. And aside from that, the early success wasn't able to get back into the Super Bowl for the longest time with some good rosters. Didn't like that at all. Ripped him pretty good for it. He gets in Dallas. I actually respected his work in Dallas. I thought he did a pretty solid job there, all
Mhm.
things considered. I thought, man, working with Jerry every day, it was a decent roster, but I thought he did a good solid job there in Dallas. And again, as a person, I like Mike McCarthy just fine. And I appreciated his press conference. I really did. I didn't think the emotion was fake. I thought it was real. And
Mhm.
I'm sure that he does love Pittsburgh and obviously has the roots there. So much respect to him on all three of those levels there for McCarthy. This was a stupid hire. I couldn't believe when I heard that the Steelers were interested in doing this. I mean, why? On what level? The dumbest thing I think I saw was over the weekend that they either had hired him or were about to hire him. ESPN kept flashing across the bottom that McCarthy was hired or was going to be hired in hopes that Aaron Rodgers would return. And I'm like, really? Coming off of the excellence of Mike Tomlin and the stoicism of Bill Cowher and the legendary Chuck Noll, your goal now is to pull in Mike McCarthy so Aaron Rodgers can come back for maybe his last season. It is the dumbest, nonsensical thing. You know how much I hate another coaching hire that we're about to talk about here in a couple of minutes. This one is worse. I couldn't believe that the Steelers, perhaps the most iconic franchise in the NFL, but certainly one of the two or three, right? Which, by the way, McCarthy's now coached about three of them, right?
Hmm.
Amazingly. Hey, goodness gracious. This was where you went. My gosh, what are you thinking? It makes no sense. I thought you were exactly right. This was the time to turn to a Shula or a Mentor or a Halfley. And I feel like all three of them, if not being offered the Ravens job, would have jumped at this one. And Brian Flores would have been top of my list. I've been table pounding for Flores for years now, literally ever since the Dolphins let him go. Any of those four guys, Flores, Shula, Mentor, Halfley, would have either uh, continued the culture or would have given you a chance here to start over with the same culture but a younger mind. Would have been thrilled with any of those hires. I don't get this at all. I don't understand it. And the roster is in decent shape. It has a couple of holes, I feel like, and then a couple of other position groups that are fantastic. So I'm sure they'll be competitive for the next couple of years. I really don't doubt that, but I just don't see the long-term direction here at all. I mean, in 3 years, whether he wins or not, isn't he done? Right? So there goes you're the only franchise in sports just about who has this kind of history with three coaches, and this was your hire. I don't understand it. I don't like it at all, and I don't mean to disrespect McCarthy necessarily. I hate this.
Yeah, M McCarthy has proven to be a good coach. I always thought everything was like pretty overblown about his, what was happening, especially in Dallas. But like again, this is more on process and just where the Steelers are at. It made sense that New York and Tennessee were looking at him because it was like, okay, we just need stability. We need someone to come
Yes.
and been there, done that.
Yes.
But there's a reason those were the only two teams. The teams that were so bad they fired their coach during the season. There was a reason those were the only teams to reach out for an interview. Um, yeah, I've never in my all my years of being a Steelers fan, I never thought that the Steelers were like incompetent, like they didn't know what they were doing. And that doesn't mean that I think this will necessarily the bottom will fall out because honestly, like if it did, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world at this point. But like they're probably just going to continue to win 10 games and not advance things the way they need to. If you want to argue that the defense is talented enough, and Patrick Graham is an awesome DC hire. I'm really excited for that. But
Yes.
McCarthy being like a little, being much more offensive minded and maybe even a little more analytically focused than Tomlin. So maybe they'll like get somewhere with that. Like that's great. But if you're also doing this so you can keep Aaron Rodgers or whatever, are you really taking the team in a forward place when the conference is still going to have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson in it? No. Um, Now I said on my show 2 weeks ago now with Ronan Summers in my way too early QB prediction episode. All right, dude, you got Mike McCarthy. Trade for Kyler Murray. Bring in Kyler Murray, and I don't care that he's too short. I don't care that he can't run the West Coast offense. If McCarthy's going to develop a quarterback and take you there, go trade for the available guy who was the number one overall pick and best high school Texas football player there's ever been, and show me and shut me up. But that's not going to happen. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers and Will Howard, and it's all going to be awful.
Yeah, I'm with you. The bottom probably is not going to fall out right away, but where does this go? This takes you nowhere. I will say on the bright side, because Man, I would have tried to repeat the process, like you said, that has been successful for a couple times in a row now. Get your young guy. Maybe he doesn't win, and you have to fire him in 2 or 3 seasons, but at least you get a shot to have another 20 or 30 year guy, right? That's what I would have wanted to do here for the Steelers. It's almost like they just. I, I won't get into that. Anyway, the bright side is you still have two of my four candidates for this job available for next off season, and that would be Flores and Shula. So if you want to bring one of them in next off season, it's still on the table. But then your nice pristine record of long-term head coaches is out the window after 1 year.
Whatever. It'll be. Let's just make it a footnote. A 1 year footnote. McCarthy gets to go out swinging with Aaron Rodgers, and then it'll. Yeah, I did think about that. Shula didn't get hired away. Shieldhouse is still in LA.
Yes.
Um, I'm doing the Ewan Robertson thing where I'm like, okay, like is KOC gonna get fired next year? Okay, that might be interesting.
Right.
Who have we talked about tonight that might be a one and done? Um, if Joe Brady, if it goes back, could Joe Brady be a one and done and come over? Could
hmm
Kubiak be a one and done and come? So, yeah, my wheels. Declan Doyle, right? Can we steal Declan Doyle from Baltimore after 1 year calling play? My wheels are turning already. I'm thinking about it.
There's always next year.
Always, it's always next year.
That's the Pittsburgh Steelers, everybody.
Yep.
If you disagree with us, tell us in the comments, but I don't think anybody's going to. Next up, everybody's favorite team, the Arizona Cardinals.
How mean of you to put Mike LaFleur looking all young and hot right after Mike McCarthy. That's just rude. That's so messed up. Look at that guy.
I
So
would
wrong.
love.
It's the
It
worst
looks
thing he
like
could
he's
have
about
done.
to take his I don't know he's about to go surfing while taking his postgraduate work, right? I mean,
He looks like he followed McCarthy as a take your kid to work day picture, and he's like his intern or something. Oh my God, it's
all
awful.
right, lay it on us, Mike LaFleur and his coaching stuff.
Um, I didn't talk much about the Steelers coach. I love Patrick Graham. Patrick Graham started off really good. I was like, he's gonna put together a good staff, and then it got depressing after that. But anyways,
Yeah.
Arizona Cardinals. Um, the Cardinals are one of the best examples this cycle of I didn't like their process, but the vibes coming out I think are actually pretty good. The Cardinals are never going to be a like highly desirable job because they have one of the worst ownership situations in the NFL. Um, but they came out with the archetype that you want. Now this might be one of yours of like supposed to be another young hotshot, but probably won't be. But Mike LaFleur, I liked what he did with the Jets when he was OC with Saleh for those first couple of seasons. I've been saying that since he was there. Um, I think, and he was kind of the first sacrifice of that New York Jets era of football. But then he goes to the Rams and he coaches. He's the OC for Sean McVay for several years. And yes, he's not calling plays. And yes, McVay is a tremendous game planner and developer. But LaFleur was right there doing all of that work with him for several seasons. So I really like that. Um, and if you're the Cardinals and you're this team that's always just like bleak and out in the wilderness, you're getting a guy who is going to be a young, forward-thinking offensive mind. Maybe you heard that with Cliff Kingsbury 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was. But Kingsbury had never done the NFL before. LaFleur has been in the NFL for a long time. He has NFL connections between McVay and his brother and all those guys that all coached together for all those years. Um, so he knows what coaching in the NFL is like. And he's going to do it in a place that, like, while ownership sucks, like, it's a pretty low-key place. So he's not going to have all eyes on him like they were when he was the OC for the Jets. But again, I thought he was pretty good with the Jets. Um, Now, the things that aren't great, the process wasn't great because if you look at the people they were interviewing, it was a pretty bleak list of candidates. And they were definitely just holding out hope for Clint Kubiak because they made their hire about 10 seconds after the Raiders announced Clint Kubiak was their coach, and the Cardinals just kind of had to pick from who was left. Um, they were really hoping to get Robert Saleh. Saleh used them as a bargaining chip to get the Titans job, and it just felt like they never really had a like, ooh, this is the good, really good candidate that might get this job with the Cardinals. Let me actually look here real quick and see who they interviewed. Scroll, 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 scroll. They had a lot of interviews. So they interviewed Joe Brady, which I was excited about. Thomas Brown, Anthony Campanile, Jeff. They did interview Halfley, but Vance Joseph. Kubiak, I mentioned that. Raheem Morris, Matt Nagy, Robert Saleh, Arthur Smith, Anthony Weaver. So I might not have given enough credit. Maybe there, between Halfley and Joe Brady, there were a couple, and Kubiak, there were a couple interesting names there. But to be the last team to make a hire because all those guys were getting hired, like Halfley took the Dolphins job. He might have gotten an offer from the Cardinals, but he took Dolphins. Brady took the Bills job. The Cardinals might have given him an offer. Kubiak took the Raiders job. So they're just working down their list. They're getting to, the fourth, fifth, sixth name on their list here in LaFleur. That's never super exciting, but the names were better than I was giving them credit for. Um, from a staff standpoint, this is the one team now, after the Browns hired their DC this afternoon. This is the one team that hasn't made an official hire for one of their coordinator spots yet. So that's not great. I'll talk about that in a second. And their OC hire was Nate Hackett. Now, listen, we know how things went for Nate Hackett when he was fully in charge of the Broncos. That was really bad. And then things did not get much better with his 1 year with the Jets, where he was supposed to make things work for Aaron Rodgers, and that obviously went poorly. Um, but Hackett is not going, I don't know if this is a good thing to say. He's not going to be the play caller and he's not going to be the head coach. So he's just a long time, very experienced, kind of like Pete Carmichael I talked about earlier, long time experienced offensive coordinator who doesn't call plays. That's kind of a low risk, low reward situation, I think. But he's a guy that's experienced. He's worked with LaFleur, obviously, so now he's working with this LaFleur, so there's a connection there. From a defensive coordinator standpoint, I think I'm betting pretty heavily that this is going to be end up being Aubrey Pleasant, who worked with LaFleur for the last several years with the Rams. I think per NFL.com, he's the only person that has interviewed for the job. Um, I want to double check that. Yep, per NFL. Yep. So per NFL.com, the only person that's interviewed for that job is Aubrey Pleasant, and that would make sense because Chris Shula is staying with the Rams. Pleasant has an opportunity to go get a promotion elsewhere. So, and the only other people that the Cardinals have actually interviewed are staying with their current team. So that's Charlie Bolin, who's staying with the Giants, and Dino Vasso, who's staying with the Texans. So, and I think Pleasant would be a good pickup. He's done a lot of good things with the Rams. He's well known, well respected. So I like this. It wasn't the best process. It's not the number one coach that could have come out of it. But I think when you're the Cardinals, you're kind of just like, yeah, well, let's give it a shot. Maybe this is the next Matt LaFleur. Maybe this is the next McVay. Maybe this is the next KOC, whatever it is. So I think this is totally fine for the Cardinals.
I'm going to make my little joke first, and that is that it's the Cardinals and nobody cares. So why should I?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
mostly that.
this is kind of the Siberia of the NFL. If it turns out great, great. If not, nobody, again, nobody cares. Go enjoy your swimming pool. I mean, that's really the way.
Maybe
Other
he
than
can be in
his,
Cliff Kingsbury's house. Remember the draft house? Maybe he can get that one.
hey, maybe so.
That's got
Other
a
than
swimming
his
pool.
last name, LaFleur, which I respect, I don't know what the heck to expect here. Okay, listen, I for whatever reason, I don't know why, things run in cycles. I got to watch the Jets a lot during that time period. I mean, a lot. They were on all the time at my
They
place,
were.
for whatever reason. I didn't like the offense at that time. I thought it was so slow and trudgy. Having said that, I mean, listen, they struggled to cross the 20-point mark routinely for several seasons, and he was part of that, right? It was a struggle to get to 18 points in a lot of those games. I mean, it was rough. Having said that, if you want to throw all of that at the feet of Jets dysfunction, and more importantly, the fact that they had a quarterback who didn't or couldn't be developed, that's fine. I am more than happy to completely rinse away and whitewash Mike LaFleur of any Jets experience that I ever saw with him. Okay? Totally fine. And maybe he'll be as good or better head coach than his brother. And that would be fantastic. And if so, then the Cardinals have hit a home run here. But I just haven't seen anything on that side of things that makes me feel thrilled. Now, having said that, again, since he's left the Jets, he's been in some good places. So maybe he's continued to add to his already sharp mind, which I'm sure he's got one. But again, that doesn't make you a great head coach. So I really don't know what to expect here. I'm not thrilled with it. I don't hate it. But again, you mentioned that there were other guys that they probably could have made a stronger attempt to pull in. And the fact we know why the Raiders were waiting, they had their guy Kubiak
Hmm.
sitting there in the Super Bowl. What the heck were the Cardinals waiting on so long here? that they couldn't go ahead and make a hire or this hire. I'm just not thrilled with it, and I don't know what to expect. I don't hate it, but again, it's the Cardinals, so I'm not too amped up or down about it.
Yep,
And it's the Cardinals, and that's all we got to say about it.
exactly.
Cardinals fans, don't hate us. I do think you have a pretty good general manager from what I've seen. I
Yeah.
think he's got work to do. We'll give him time to do it. Stay tuned. Robert Saleh, the Tennessee Titans. Give it to us, Simon.
I'll be quick. I know you have a lot more to say on this one than I do. Um, this was another one of my. I didn't love the process, but I think I like the vibes and result coming out of it. They got to interview candidates early by being the first team that fired their coach, um, and they cast a hugely wide net. But they spent a lot of time on coaches that were not highly coveted this cycle, especially Matt Nagy, and that was
Yeah,
very clearly Borgonzi really wanting it to be Nagy.
right.
So I'd be really interested if Amy Adams Strunk was the one that Scrunk, sorry, was the one that said no, it's going to be Sala. That would be fascinating to know. But it was clear that Borgonzi wanted Nagy, and you get into the whole like conspiracy theory of like Andy Reid like quiet firing Nagy, maybe because like he's pushed like a mother bird pushing out a baby, like I need you to fly, so like you're either gonna hit the ground or you're gonna make it happen. Um, Reid really wanted Nagy to get a head coach job this cycle. And so I think there might have been a little triangle there of like, you're going to hire Nagy, right? Let's make this happen. Um, and then, so not only did they pigeonhole themselves in Nagy, but then they let Saleh strong arm them into hiring him by saying, "Well, I'm going to Arizona tomorrow, and they're probably going to offer me the job, and I'm going to take it. So if you want me, like, you have to decide that right now." And the fact that that was just the position they got themselves in, like, oh my gosh, we have 12 hours to decide between Robert Saleh and Matt Nagy, even though we just drafted a quarterback number one overall 8 months ago or 11 months ago, whatever it was, is real tough. And especially for the franchise that, again, just 2 years ago, I was like, they're going to end up with the most milquetoast, offensive minded coach in this cycle. And that's what happened. And it was a horrible experience for everybody. That said, I'm kind of excited because Robert Saleh had some elite defenses, pretty much has coached an elite defense anytime he's been given any kind of real talent on that side of the ball. And I do think he held that Jets thing together so well for as long as humanly possible. I mean, look what happened with Aaron Glenn and how immediately that has fallen off the rails. And not only that, he's bringing Brian Daboll, which I'm extremely excited about to see Daboll with Cam Ward. Daboll had a chance to get the Bills head coach job. I don't know if he chose the Titans or the Bills chose Brady first. Um, but I think Daboll really wanted this job. And I think if he can be there for a couple of years and really set up Cam Ward for success long term, and Salah takes care of that defense, um, I really like where Tennessee is set up. So again, I didn't like the process, but I do kind of like this end result, especially with Dayball being the OC attached. And even so, like Salah brought over LaFleur with the Jets. Like if Salah had gotten to just pick off the Shanahan or McVay tree, even if it wasn't Dayball, I think I still would have been pretty happy with it. But Dayball specifically, I'm excited to see get his hands on Cam Ward. So that's all I'll say about Tennessee. I'll cede the rest of my time to you, Ben.
Full disclosure here to the audience, Simon already knows that I hate this hire and that I would have hated any team that hired Robert Saleh as head coach. All right, now I'll get into that in a second. But before I rip it, which I'm going to, I gotta say, Robert Saleh is a smart guy. And as far as him handling any defense anywhere, I love his work. I think his work is fantastic. Sometimes when he doesn't have a ton of talent, his work is still good. But certainly when you give him the talent, he knows exactly what to do with it. So his defensive work, and I really don't doubt the Titans already have quite a few pieces in place on defense, but they have the opportunity this offseason to add to it. So if they add to it, and again, you just never know how the draft and free agency will break, but if they add to it, I don't doubt that the Titans will quickly put together a very good defense. And I mean top 10 and maybe even better depending on, how many resources they pour into that. I don't doubt that. And that alone will keep them competitive in that division. That will keep them in all these games. And listen, I don't doubt Salah's ability to keep his team in games. We've seen him do that already. I don't doubt that at all. And Dable coming in as offensive coordinator, I trust Dable as OC to continue the work that has been done with Cam Ward. I don't doubt that between these two guys, they will stay competitive. And who knows? You never know. They may even flip out a playoff appearance. But that's as far as I'm willing to go. Again, I don't think it's a disaster, but there is just no world in which I'm okay with Robert Saleh being the head coach. I watched him with the New York Jets, and I just didn't like the style. He had so much talent on that Jets defense to work with. And I'm not saying that just anybody could have done what he did with the Jets, but there's a lot of guys who could have taken that defensive talent that he had and been competitive, which he was. I think he had two 7-10 seasons, and then he had a really bad season, which is going to happen sometimes. I'm not faulting him necessarily for the bad season. But again, I watched a ton of Jets football during that time period, and I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with the decision making in general. I wasn't happy with the fact that the offense looked so unable to come up with enough points to support the defense. I was never happy with that. I really didn't like that at all. And I mentioned, again, if you're seeing a segment, you may not have seen the earlier segment. I mentioned earlier about coaches that have a tendency to be energetic versus guys that have a tendency to be somewhat hokey and a little bit too out there in terms of how they try to motivate their team. What I've seen from Salah, I don't like in that department as well. It comes off a little hokey, a little bit junior highish when he's trying to motivate the overall team. That may work in a defensive meeting where you're trying to rally the guys. I just don't like that leadership style for the overall group. And again, I don't expect this to be a pure disaster where he's getting 3 or 4 wins a season. But dang it, this is not who I want running my football team. It's just not. And I don't think it ever will be. He's got to listen, what does he care what I think, right? He's got a second job and a whole heck of a lot of money, right? So, but if he's going to win me over, he's got a lot of work to do. All right. It's going to take a lot of winning, not just one wild card scratch out appearance. It's going to take a lot of sustained winning for me to change my mind about that. And that's where I'm at on Robert Saleh. So anyway, I will say here, you mentioned the Titans being unwilling or unable to get the top names in the building, and Saleh actually being able, which this was very smart on his part, to pressure slash leverage them into hiring him. That was
Uh-huh.
great. That's beautiful by Robert Saleh. Absolutely beautiful. But it only adds to what is starting to become a regular routine of Titans dysfunction the past 2 or 3 seasons. And it's too bad. I think it was Jeff Fisher that was there for so long and led the team to the Super Bowl in the early 2000s against the Rams and had a long record of winning. And then you had Mike Vrabel in the building, and you let him go after a power struggle. And I haven't seen anything from this latest round of ownership that makes me think that it's going to be any less dysfunctional than the Browns and the Jets and to a lesser degree the Dolphins. It's not looking good. Now, maybe Saleh and Dable can come in here and kind of be the adults in the room like we're hoping Aaron Glenn can do with the Jets, but it hasn't looked good early on for Glenn and the Jets either. So I think that's an added burden here that Robert Saleh's got to deal with. I'm just not a fan of the way this Titans ownership group is running things the past 2 or 3 seasons. And, it doesn't look good from the overview standpoint either from the owner's box.
Yeah, to come back to a guy that seems very similar to Vrabel in a lot of ways when all of this started these last 4 years by John Robinson, the GM, and Vrabel, the head coach, having their power struggle, resulting in each to be fired at different times. And then the GM and head coach brought in to replace both of those guys also get fired in less than 2 seasons. And now we're on Borgonzi, who really just wanted Nagy, and that didn't work out. Um, Showing that maybe he doesn't have a lot of power. So when things don't work out with Solid, we're gonna have a new GM, and then we're gonna have to do this whole song and dance. Yeah, the things in Tennessee don't seem great, but I also saw that there's been extensive research done that this is the most bald coaching staff in NFL history. So shout out to the people who did that work, and obviously I think that'll work out. they have less to focus on. You know, all the coaches are going to wake up in the morning. They don't have to do their hair. They'll be grinding tape right away.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Yeah. So hey, listen, I'm gonna stay on the Titans here for a second. I'm gonna keep piling on, not on Sala. Okay, I'm not piling on Sala. I'm piling on the Titans here. Well, listen, I was totally fine with Borgonzi getting hired over from Kansas City because obviously you've got a lot of you've not only got the Andy Reid massive influence there,
Hmm.
but you know their GM over there has done a great job too. I feel like
They've
combined
drafted
with Andy
really
Reid.
well. Hmm.
So I was totally fine with the. One reason I don't have a lot of strong belief in the fact that people know each other and that's a good thing previous to working somewhere else. That can be a great thing. But when you see Borgonzi trying to hire Nagy, who nobody else wants to be their head coach, then I have to go back and say, well, why? Why are you just looking for somebody you can control? Are you just looking for a friendly face in the building? There's no point at that point to be hiring somebody you've worked with before. I mean that doesn't make any sense, and it is interesting. Maybe the ownership stepped in there and said, "Nope, we're not doing that one." And I don't. In addition to that, listen, we see so many of these owners with such impatience. Cleveland was so impatient, Haslam, the owner, with their coaches until they let Stefanski stay for a little while. But for a while there, it was just constant turnover. The same thing for the Raiders with Mark Davis, just constant turnover. And, you I know a lot of these owners have been successful, not all of them, but a lot of them have been successful in other areas of business and they think they know the secrets to success and they get over here in football and try to do the same thing and it doesn't work because they don't know what they're doing. And they really feel like, well, if I gave a guy 3 years, I was patient. The heck you were. They don't
Hmm.
understand about building something, growing something, letting it develop, letting it they don't seem to understand that, and then they just start firing people. Firing people. We're not going to put up with this. We're not going to put up with this. We're going to fire this guy, that guy. Same thing with the Jets. They're up here firing the whole coaching staff except for Aaron Glenn, who's only been there for one season. It the it Some of these people should not be owners. It's just the flat out truth, and I feel bad for the fans who have to put up with that kind of nonsense for decades, literally. But some of these people should not be owners. I haven't yet come to that conclusion with the Titans owners, but it's trending that way. Final thoughts on the Titans here.
Nothing helpful. Nothing good. Brian Daboll and Robert Saleh. Two good exes. Ooh, one thing I did think about actually. Saleh said he's going to be calling the defensive plays, which he didn't always do with the Jets. And when you talked about like the decision making stuff, something that also clicked is he and his two coordinators, because Gus Bradley is his defensive coordinator, have all been head coaches before. So now, granted, not the most success between the three of them as head coaches, but it'll
Right.
just be, I think it'll be nice for Saleh to kind of have that to lean on instead of, Ulbrich, who was an assistant for a long time when he was Saleh's DC with the Jets, and then LaFleur, who was very young, always an assistant. He's got a veteran group of coaches here while he takes control of calling the defensive plays again. He's got two guys that have been head coaches that can really handle the administrative stuff, the coordinating stuff, the day to day, but also like, hey, game day decisions. Like I don't know if they've hired somebody that is going to be, they have those specific game management coordinators now in a lot of places. I don't know if he's hiring one of those, but the fact that he's had two people who have done those things, I think that's taking another thing off his plate while he does that. So I think there's a lot of smart stuff with the staff that he's kind of already put together, which I'm interested in. But yeah, the process of everything with not only this hire but just everything happening in Tennessee the last 5 years is not ideal.
And philosophically, there is a case to be made that that could work. Where Saleh, who I do trust with the defense, and Dable, who I basically trust with the offense, even though it is a younger quarterback, and then you have maybe somebody else at least managing the game decisions, even if ultimately they flip it over to Saleh to make that decision. There's a world that could work. Anyway, that's the Titans. I think we've ripped them enough. Let's go on to the Atlanta Falcons and Kevin Stefanski. Simon.
Oh wait, hang on. I just checked. Offensive assistant slash game management, Cade Knox. So the Titans do have somebody for that. I know nothing about this person. He looks very young. Um, he doesn't even have a bio on the Titans website, but they do have somebody that's in charge of that. So shout out to that guy.
Probably safe to say that's a deep analytics expert of some kind.
Sure, it'll go great. All right, who are we talking about now? Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta. You know what's funny? This was another team that I thought this was a great hire when it happened. And then a string of decisions since then has made me a little more nervous. I actually tried to look through my Twitter specifically today to see like, okay, why do I feel icky about this? I'm sure I've tweeted to some reaction, but maybe it was just all the like Matt Ryan, GM, not GM, hiring the Bears guy for that relationship. Then there was a whole discourse about like how much Ian Cunningham did with the Bears versus didn't get to do and what they think he's going to do in Atlanta. And oh, what does this mean for Kirk Cousins? And oh, they're going to do this. And who's the quarterback? But I think all of that was just stuff as opposed to the hardball thing that really doesn't matter for what I think Stefanski can do for Atlanta. And regardless of who the quarterback is, because Stefanski has shown he can coach a good team no matter who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
This was a very good hire for Atlanta. Stefanski immediately, when he got let go from the Browns, was one of the top candidates as well. Um, and I do think that at the end of the day, if it's Matt Ryan kind of being just like the face of things and a GM that he has a connection with, and Arthur Blank is an owner that I think is learning a little bit from his experience with, hey, I need a football person that I trust to be my line between me and the GM because we'll always think back to that conversation between him and Terry Fontenot on draft day when it was like, why did we just draft a quarterback 8 overall when I just paid Kirk Cousins all this money? Now he's going to have a person that he trusts to go between, but that also means he's not going to try to be as involved with those things. We've seen owners have those things happen and then try and be more involved themselves. But now he's got Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan has come out and said, I'm not the GM. I'm not picking the players on draft night. I'm helping these guys. I will assist Cunningham when wants my opinion. If Stefanski has a question for me, I will do my best to answer it. But I'm not making the decisions. I think Matt Ryan is just there for, hey, how can I explain these football decisions to Arthur Blank in a way that's going to make him feel comfortable, basically? So I think that makes sense. Ian Cunningham was there with Ryan Poles, who had his ups and downs early with Chicago, but at the end of the day, that process has worked out. Um, and Matt Ryan's going to trust him. And Stefanski's just a good football coach. And I know things oscillated heavily between being a coach of the year and then having a 3-win season. But it was a horrible situation in Cleveland. And what regardless of what happens with Atlanta in terms of what they do at quarterback in 2026 or 2027, um, it's just a better it's a better organization. It's a better franchise, it's a better place to be. And if Stefanski can figure out the quarterback thing, things are pretty well set up for them moving forward. You know, they have talented offensive pieces, they have parts of an offensive line that have been successful. Now he's going to have to bolster that thing up. But we've seen him do that with Cleveland and the defense. They're retaining defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich after the team's coming off their best defense that they've had in years. So I think that's good. Stefanski's bringing over Tommy Reese, who's going to be calling the plays, but has worked with Stefanski for a long time. They have a good working relationship as well. So I think this is just another like we're providing some stability. We're getting an offensive mind that when we get the quarterback in, and who knows, maybe it's Penix, maybe it's health, he's healthy enough, and it all works out. But if not, if we can just plug in a quarterback here, we have the bones of something good. And Stefanski is a good football coach. So I think this is a pretty positive hire as well.
I have mixed feelings on this, and that really does not stem from Kevin Stefanski, who I actually like. I really think that he's a very good, solid football coach. Plus side, if Atlanta keeps him for 5 years, I feel like they have a better chance at making the playoffs in those 5 years than they have had. I really believe that. And this division is sitting here for the taking, right? And nobody's stepped up and claimed it since Brady left, in terms of actually going on to greater things, right? I mean, people are winning the division, of course, but not doing greater things than that. This division is here for the taking. Stefanski, I think, will do a very solid job. So I love the Falcons getting Stefanski, even though it wasn't my first choice necessarily for Atlanta. Really love them getting Stefanski. I think that's a great hire. And I'm with you when it comes to Jeff Ulbrich being the DC. I like that part of it. Now, the two parts that I'm not thrilled with are the Tommy Reese parts and the Matt Ryan parts. I feel like it's again too many cooks in the kitchen here, and this may not manifest itself in the first season. I just don't really see where Matt Ryan fits in. I really don't. I mean, I being a sound piece between the owner and the rest of the room and explaining things, that part does make sense, but Kevin Stefanski is not going to want to go to Matt Ryan and ask his opinion too often on things.
Nah.
He's been around and he's gotten an earful from Haslam for years. So Stefanski's ready to just have a clean mind and, and do his thing. And quite honestly, same thing for Cunningham, the general manager. He's not going to want to go to Matt Ryan and ask things. Like he's got his own mindset. And it's fair to wonder. Cunningham's been on fairly short list for general manager searches for 3 or 4 years now. His name has been worked around a good bit, and I know he's a bright guy. But again, we haven't actually seen his work. We've seen Ryan Poles' work mixed with his, and we don't know whose is whose, right? And even that didn't work great until Ben Johnson showed up and started coaching the team. So it's fair to ask, what do we expect from Cunningham? But I'm okay with that. I'm just not sure exactly, does Cunningham have everything that the normal GM would have? Is he going to have to be a little bit more involved with Matt Ryan than he wants to be? I'm not thrilled
Hmm.
with that setup, to be honest. It feels sloppy. And again, excuse me, that may not show up in the first year or two, but as the years go on, I don't see that working out very well, to be quite honest. And we'll see. I don't blame anybody for that. I don't blame Matt Ryan for that. I don't blame Ian Cunningham for taking the job under those circumstances. I'm just not thrilled with it. It feels Brady in Las Vegas-ish. Is feels very similar to that. I'm just not thrilled with it. You get back to Tommy Rees, though, as offensive coordinator. I got to watch him do some work with, I believe it was Notre Dame. I saw him work with, and I just was not thrilled with his offenses, and neither were the Notre Dame fans. I just wasn't thrilled with it. Now, obviously, he's worked his way up through the ranks, and again, he's earned this job by paying his dues. I just haven't enjoyed the offenses that I've seen from him anywhere. I don't think they're bad. I just don't think they are fluid. I don't feel like they are uh, s- innovative or cutting edge. I don't feel like they are staples of what we've seen from Shanahan and that group or the McVay group. I haven't seen enough there to make me really excited about that. So I was disappointed here, especially, man, you and I have gone so deep on this coach carousel stuff and we've batted around so many names for potential coordinators. When Tommy Rees showed up, I was disappointed, and he may prove me wrong, and maybe between him and Stefanski, they'll be more than fine, but I just wasn't thrilled with that part of it. Having said that, I still like the Stefanski hire. Excuse me, voice is getting dry. And I still like the Cunningham hire.
I was just double checking some like connections with these guys, and it's funny. Tommy Rees became the Browns OC just in 2025, after that failed experiment with Ken Dorsey in 2024.
Yeah.
But Reese was there in 2024 as well, but not a long time with Stefanski. The funnier one was Cunningham because he, like Ryan Poles, and I might have said Ryan Pace earlier, but I remember Ryan Poles, obviously. They were both 1 year NFL practice squad offensive linemen, but not on the same team. So I was like, were these guys just like in training camp together and made a practice squad and then became pals? And but the funny connection is Cunningham was with the Chiefs in 2008 on their practice squad before going to the Ravens as a personnel member in their front office the following season. Um, and Poles was a 1 year practice squad offensive lineman for the Bears before going to the Chiefs in their personnel department the next year. So no actual crossover, but funny how they have similar histories there. Um, the other thing that's funny with Cunningham and Ryan's and that relationship is I like exploring these relationships that are overblown, right? And I think you said something about that a little earlier too. Cunningham was immediately connected to Matt Ryan's, not because they know each other or have worked together, but because Cunningham worked for Poles and Poles was an offensive lineman for Matt Ryan in at Boston College like 20 years ago. And it was just it's funny how we connect these dots sometimes, and sometimes we do too big of reaches where it's like 20 years ago, Matt Ryan's played football with Ryan Poles, and Ryan Poles now works with this guy for 3 years. That means he's going to be the GM. But that is what ended up happening. So the dot connectors were right there. So yeah, is this going to be like a friend of a friend situation, right? Like you're in a friend group and it's like you bring your friend you know from this and then your friend you know from that and you're like they'll be friends and then they get there and then they're like they don't actually get along. Like at the end of the like Brian Poles walks away from the party and just leaves Matt Ryan and Ian Cunningham together and they're just like don't actually know what to say to this person. How like it could be too many cooks in the kitchen. You're 100% right. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. But yes, Stefanski on his own. I think I saw somewhere where like one of the things where like if it doesn't work out with Tommy, I think Matt Ryan might have even said this. If things don't work out with Tommy Reese or he gets hired away, I think was probably the example he used. Like Stefanski can just call the plays. Just like should we just do that? Should we just do that if we're already kind of planning for it
Right.
eventually? I don't know. I don't know. But Stefanski for himself is a good coach, and I think, and I like the experience he has, and I think he's done well. Not just he's a good coach that has a bad rap, like good coach and has proven to be a good coach even in Cleveland. So I think this will be all right.
I would feel better if Stefanski were calling the plays myself than what I've seen from Tommy Reese. And again, people have the right to develop. So, like anybody, you continue to get better at your craft. I know there are people who point to Stefanski's losing seasons in Cleveland and say, "Hey, why is this guy anything coveted or special?" I get it, but I've seen enough good out of him, and I've seen enough on-field things that I liked out of Stefanski over the years that he immediately was one of my top candidates when he got hired. And going back to the connections business, you're 100% right. That is how it works. People hire people they know. I mean, 90% of the time, that's exactly what goes on. I just don't think they should do it that much because I think too often they're just hiring a friendly face or they're hiring somebody that they kind of connected with and they're not hiring the most talented person out there. Or in some cases, even the person that would fit what they do best, I feel like that just happens too much, but that is exactly what happens, not just in the NFL, but in every business that has ever existed anywhere on the face of the planet. You hire people that you've run across at some point. That's the Atlanta Falcons. I believe we have another team left. We do. Cleveland Browns. I left them last on purpose just because they're the Cleveland Browns. I wish the Browns would get a new owner. I really do. It's not happening right now. Probably won't happen for a while. The Browns could really use a new owner. But for now, they've got what they've got, so that's why I put them last. Here we go. Cleveland Browns, Todd Monken coming in. Lay the table for us.
Yeah, this was always going to be a tough spot with this hire for Cleveland. You know, the coach was going to have to answer to Andrew Barry, who was very much another one of those GMs that I thought also should have gone with the head coach, do a clean house kind of situation. That didn't happen. This coach was going to have to start their tenure still under the weight of the Deshaun Watson contract. And this coach was going to have to follow a coach that had multiple losing seasons, but also two Coach of the Year awards under his belt in Stefanski. Then the Browns made it harder on themselves by creating a personality and aptitude test that all of the candidates had to fulfill and complete as part of their interview process. And yet, despite all of that, this job was coveted to a degree by young forward-thinking coaches. Grant Udinski, Nate Shieldhouse were guys that were in it really until the very end. And I know guys like Minter and Shula were pulling themselves out of the job, and Udinski eventually did as well. But Udinski was in there until the end. And I wonder if he was one of those people that didn't want to keep Jim Schwartz, which is interesting. But I wonder if that was the final sticking point for him. And Shieldhouse, like, I think it came down to Monken or Shieldhouse or Schwartz for the Browns. Like, I think he would have taken the job had they offered it to him. Um, so that gives them something, right? That gives them a little something. And but then they just take so long to make the decision, and they take so long to essentially whittle it down to Monken versus Schwartz. And they do so in a way that ends up alienating Schwartz, where I think there was a way they could have done this and kept Jim Schwartz on, but I think they just they kept this thing going for too long that he was like, all right, I'm done. Like there were plenty other DC opportunities I could have had that I at least would have been interested in interviewing for versus staying with this job. And now I'm just pissed, and now I'm gone. And you hire a guy that's basically me, but on the offense side, and it's not one of these young guys that like I can kind of mentor or whatever. Like I'm out of here. Um, And so I'm a little worried about that. And they end up just like getting they get who was it that they hired? They hired Mike Rutenberg, who I believe coached under Schwartz at some point. But he comes over from Atlanta, and so they're gonna do the thing where, because Monken came in and was like, I didn't come for Jim Schwartz, but I did come for the defense. So he's gonna have this guy coach Schwartz's defense, which never goes well when you just have a new coach try to coach the exact same defense. So we'll see how that works out. Um, but if we're gonna try and look at the positive, Monken came into Baltimore and immediately like vaulted their offense, right? So at least, at the very least, you have a guy who has proven to put good offenses together, really good offenses. Now you don't have that quarterback, and you don't have the route to get to even a good quarterback situation as of right now. So he's really going to be tested. Um, and he's bringing over, so not only Mike Rudenberg is the DC, but Travis Switzer is the offensive coordinator. He comes from Baltimore as well. Um, I think most of Monken's guys, he's just pulling like random assistants from Baltimore. Switzer was their run game coordinator. I don't even think he was a position coach. So we'll see, how the coaching staff gets round out and what that all looks like. But um, yeah, it was always going to be a tough spot, and it's a bummer for Monken, for sure. But I don't love this process because, I think they wanted to get one of these younger guys. I think they were trying to do that, and it seems like they kind of just are taking the hand they were dealt with, choosing between a couple old guys that have been around for a while.
It's a great point you make about, yes, some guys were not interested in this job at all, and yet there were some notable coveted names up and coming that were hanging around it and kind of waiting to see could this be the job that they get, maybe the only job that they get, even until the very end there. I have a lot of respect for Todd Monken, if for no other reason than yes, the work that you mentioned that he did in Baltimore, I thought he did a tremendous job there. And I don't doubt that he'll keep these guys competitive. I'm sure he's going to put together a coaching staff that knows how to do day-to-day ops very well and just knows how to run practice very well. And I don't have any doubt about that. And Andrew Berry, who maybe should be gone if for a couple of reasons possibly, hasn't done a bad job of bringing in talent at least since he got hired compared to what came before him. That was a rough group that came in before him and tried to do things a very different way. So it, it- with Barry there, they've got a chance at least to infuse some younger talent mixed with quite a bit of talent that is on the roster still. Having said that, I don't think the Munkin experience is going to last longer than 2 seasons. And that's probably got less to do with Todd Munkin than it does to do with Haslam, the owner. I just think he's one of the worst owners in professional sports right now. Maybe not the worst, but he's one of the worst. And I don't think he's going to put up with having given Stefanski what he would probably consider a very long time to get the job done and probably giving himself none of the blame for the Deshaun Watson scenario. He's probably back to the mindset of let's give this guy one chance or two chances, and if he can't get it done, he's out. We'll bring in the next guy. So I just figure that's what's going to happen in Cleveland. You mentioned it; it's a tough spot for Todd Monken. Cleveland has put themselves in this spot over the years by doing a lot of really bad, dysfunctional kind of things, and you're right. They had to choose between a couple of older guys ultimately. And I figure Monken keeps them competitive, especially with the talent that's there on defense. But dang it, he's got to closely, not completely, closely rebuild that whole offensive line. The cap numbers are a mess right now. They'll straighten themselves out over this offseason and the next. So it's not the end of the world. You've mentioned it before. Denver with Russell Wilson's contract weighing on them was still able to get out there and get after it and probably should have been in the Super Bowl this year if it weren't for the Bo Nix injury, quite honestly. So it's not the end of the world, but it certainly does hamper and hinder everything that you're trying to do. And then you just kind of have the bad aroma that comes from the entire Watson situation hanging over you. And then what are you going to do at quarterback? Can you develop Shador Sanders? Are you going to go and grab another one in this year's draft to add to the one, two, or zero quarterbacks that you have on the roster, depending on how you want to count those? It's a lot. It's a lot. And, I don't feel good about where it's going to go. That's not to say they can't win some games and compete for the next couple of seasons. I just figure Haslam moves on here pretty quickly because the cards that are sitting there are not laying out very well for them to just turn this thing around, overnight.
You can tell we feel bad for Todd Monken because, like, really, we should be. This is a hire we should just be like stomping, basically. Like this should not be considered a good hire at all. Like this guy, Monken's been an OC for the last decade between college and the NFL at a couple different places, including Cleveland. Um, hasn't been a head coach since I think 2015 at Southern Miss, and it, it is older. I don't want to be ageist or anything like that, but like yes, put together a good offense, but he's not like on the cutting edge of things necessarily. Um, and so this shouldn't it regardless of situation around it, like if this even if this was like a better team, like if the Steelers had hired Todd Monken, and I did actually do this, I compared him to McCarthy, but from the time McCarthy became the play caller again in Dallas in 2023, and that was the year Monken was hired in Baltimore, 2023, the Ravens had better offenses. And listen, like the Cowboys had Dak Prescott for a year and a half of that before, Dak in 2024 was hurt. Um, but Baltimore's offenses were better. And so you want to give him that credit. But there's also just nothing in his history that suggests like, yeah, like NFL head coach. Like he's ready for that. Like he's been and listen, he had a nice like viral moment also not at his press conference, but like when he's seeing his office for the first time, like, he's like, you work your whole life for the and yeah, all that's great, but also like does that mean you're the person for the job? Probably not. And again, it's Cleveland, so like we could bash them all we want, but at the end of the day, like Cleveland's gonna do that enough, so I guess we don't have to.
I think that's right. And I don't mean to disrespect Monken. He hasn't been on anybody, I shouldn't say anybody's. He has not been anywhere near the short list of top head coach candidates since he even arrived at Baltimore and started showing the work that he could do there with
Hmm.
Lamar. Even that's got him on the long list, but never on the
Hmm.
short list. So, that's not a coveted name. Again, he knows football. I do feel like he'll keep them competitive, especially with what talent is sitting there on defense. I figure that's about it, though. I just it would take something unusual for this to break out into something special. That's the Cleveland Browns, everybody. We're going to round this up tonight with another look at Simon's board here. You've heard all the grades, but again, you can see the names here and see the grades. He did a vibes grade, a process grade, a result grade. Simon, I really appreciate it. Again, nobody's done more work than you on this coaching carousel thing this year. And again, we've all done quite a bit. Shane and Austin couldn't be here tonight, but they did a tremendous amount of work on it as well over the past few weeks. Pretty much ever since early December is when we start this every year. We just kind of start looking ahead at what might happen. And then we react, and then we try to also make good suggestions on these things as well. But you've gone the deepest and just done a ton of work on the connections that these guys have, which often, 9 times out of 10, more than that, 99 times out of 100, the connections that these guys have is why they hire some of the people that they hire. I mean, absolutely. But also, who are the young upcoming names? A lot of work there, so really appreciate it. Final thoughts here on our coaching carousel process this year.
Oh man, yeah, just a lot of work, a lot of fun. Really appreciate you hosting and putting these together. So hopefully, viewers on this channel will enjoy it. And I don't love the firing coaches part, but I certainly always love this part. So can't wait to do it again next year and hope for maybe fewer openings because I had a hard time putting enough staffs together for this one. Of course, I didn't expect McCarthy to get involved, but we'll put that away and I won't think about it for a year.
10, 10 firings, and we didn't even touch on all the coordinator changes as well.
Oh
We touched on the
gosh.
ones within these 10 umbrellas, but there were obviously more. We're just not going to get into all that. If you've hung around for this long, you've watched the entire thing, we appreciate you hanging out with us. We do put a lot of work into this, much more than what you'll get from a lot of the talking heads who just kind of put something out there real quick. We've spent quite a bit of time on this year. So thank you for hanging around with us. Hope you enjoy the off season. This is Pro Football Enterprises. Simon, if you will, real quick before we kick out here, Box Score Network, let everybody know what they're looking at for the next few months here.
Box Score Network is your number one draft hub from now until the NFL draft. We have player profiles coming from Ben, Austin, and Shane. We'll have draft conversations from me and Ben. We will have big boards from me, Ben, Austin, Peyton from Box Score Network as well. Hopefully, mock drafts, big boards, draft discussions, player profiles, all that stuff. Ben and I very soon will get into our draft war room series where we look at the draft from team perspectives. So you're going to get the draft covered from all angles. We might end up at 2 or 3 videos on the channel per week. So go over to Box Score Network YouTube channel. And then a quick shout out Simon and Friends podcast where Ben comes on talk draft, and we'll have some other Box Score Network hosts as well that you may be familiar with coming on talk NFL. So make sure you guys are checking all that out along with this video podcast whenever you get the chance.
Simon, thank you very much. Everybody watching, we really appreciate it and hope you have a great one. Goodbye.